Hi, welcome to How to Make Communion Bread. Today we're going to be demonstrating a recipe that's found in Ministry Magazine. Apparently it's the official recipe for Seventh-day Adventists, but you can use most any communion bread recipe as long as it doesn't have leaven in it. So I've got the ingredients out here. We have flour, olive oil, salt, and cold water. I actually put a few ice cubes in the water, and I use filtered water because I don't much care for the taste of the tap water here in Frederick. But do what you feel comfortable doing. I've also sanitized the countertop here. You're also going to need a sifter, a knife, a fork, a bowl for mixing. I've used the shallow bowl just for ease of showing you what this process looks like. You can use wax paper, or I've got parchment paper right here for rolling it out. Now, since we've moved, we don't have everything unpacked, and the one thing I am missing is a rolling pin. So I'm going to improvise, and you can improvise in many things. Anyways, let's turn the oven on to 450 degrees to bake and to get it warmed up. All right, I measured out, I pre-measured all the ingredients, and going to be adding it. One of the other things I failed to mention, I don't have a sifter available, so I do have the small sifter, but putting a cup and sifting it into the bowl is going to be a little bit more difficult. I guess I could have used 2 half cups instead of the 1 cup, but this will help your flour and your salt to mix well, and also should help not to make the bread so chewy. There's also another step that you do so it's not so chewy, a little bit more flaky. And that is, and we'll be talking about that, or demonstrating that, is to don't overmix it. It's kind of like biscuits. You don't want to overmix it. Next, I'm going to be sifting the salt. And I have here a 1/4 tablespoon. This was one I didn't have already pre-measured, but I'm going to measure 1/4 teaspoon, not tablespoon, 1/4 teaspoon, the smaller. And I'm going to put it in here and just sift it over. You hear the beeper going off, indicating that my oven is now at 450 degrees. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to mix in that salt a little bit before I add the water. Now, you don't have to worry too much about, you're not going to stretch the gluten when it's dry. That'll happen if you have the moisture in there, the water in there. And that's the next thing I'm going to put in is the water. So I'm going to pour the water in there, and then I will try and tip it a little bit. You just want to get it mixed in a little bit here. Start to get it moistened, and then you're going to want to add your oil. And I like to, with both the water and the oil, to move it around while I am pouring it in different places. So again, we're just wanting to moisten. I don't know if you can see that or not. We're just going to get it till it's moistened, not trying to knead it like you would regular bread. When the Israelites were making the unleavened bread, they were supposed to do it fast, and that's why they left the leaven out on the night that they were to leave Egypt. They were supposed to not put the leaven in because they didn't have time for it to rise. And that's where the concept of the unleavened bread comes from. And so we do not have leavening agents such as baking powder, baking soda, or yeast in this. Now, since I have washed my hands properly with soap and water for during COVID, we're doing it for 40 seconds now. I'm going to get in there. You see it's starting to lump up. You may need to add a little bit more water. So I'm just going to take a half a tablespoon, because this looks a little bit dry. And it is going to be a little bit dry because you're not, as I said, you're not making bread dough per se, and you're not mixing it as hard. Then what I like to do is I will just scrunch it together by hand to try to get it to form a ball. You also can tell the texture better and how much more water you may want to add. I've found that with all communion recipes, you're going to have to play it by touch to get the right consistency. This is still a little bit dry. Maybe the flour had been sitting a little while, so it was a little bit more compact. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water, so to get it to stick a little bit better. Some people like to add herbs to it. In Exodus it talks about the bitter herbs and spices, but when you're making it for a group of people, don't want to do too much. Okay, now I want to take my parchment paper or my wax paper, whichever you're using, and you're going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on it. Don't need much, don't need a whole lot. I'm just taking a teaspoon here. Now if you're doing it on the countertop like I sometimes do, but for this purpose I'm doing it on the wax paper or the parchment paper, and then you can smooth it over. You're not going to be able to do it on the top one. You can sprinkle it if it's too wet on the top of your dough, your batter. I guess it's dough, and you can see this is still pretty dry. So I'm going to add a little bit more water, another half tablespoon. And the problem with doing that is to mix it in, I could start creating those gluten chains through the mixing process. So this is something, if you have a Bosch, you're not going to want to do in a Bosch. You definitely want to do this by hand. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to set it on here. I'm going to press it down on that flour, and I'm going to turn it over. And this is just something that I'll do. So I have now have some flour on both sides. I'm going to take this parchment paper and lay it on top. Now I mentioned that I don't have a rolling pin, so I'm just going to take a glass and I'm going to use this. The problem with using a glass is it's got a slope to it, so it's not going to roll it out evenly. So you would turn your glass and use both sides, and you just roll it until you get, the recipe says, till you have it about the size of a thick pie crust. It's hard when you're doing it with parchment paper, and I don't normally use parchment paper on the top. When I have a rolling pin, I just use flour, and so I can see it better. But I also know about how big, how wide a diameter this can be. You can also fill it through the parchment paper. So finished rolling this out. That's a little bit too thick yet, so roll it a little bit harder. And you don't have to, like a pie crust, it doesn't need to be perfectly round. With pie crust, you just want to make sure that it'll cover the whole pan. With communion bread, it doesn't matter. It's going to look kind of messy, jagged in areas. Okay. This is still a little thick, but for demonstration purposes, it's all right. The next thing you're going to want to do, and this is very important, you're going to want to poke holes in it, like you're making crackers. So I'm going to need a little bit of flour in here. And otherwise it'll bubble up, and you want to be very liberal with the pokes. I like to do one way and then turn my fork and do another way with a pattern across, and then turn it another way. Once you got it good and poked, you're going to want to pre-cut it into pieces. It doesn't have to go all the way through the bread. And normally I will use a pizza slicer. You know, it's got a round wheel on it and a handle. Haven't unpacked it yet. So what I have is a knife, very thin knife, and I'm just going to let it slide through, not all the way through, but gently pre-marking where it's going to break. And I'll do it one direction, not the music group. That's a little dad joke there. Okay, so, and then the other direction. So we're going to have squares. Now, some people like big pieces, some people just like little pieces. So it doesn't have to be even sizes. And I try to do that. I try to make, or I should say, I try not to make it all even, because some people do like the smaller pieces and some like a larger piece. Now, if I get one that's too wide, I will go back the other way. But I've got a good section of small and large pieces. The next thing you want to do is you're going to want to transfer this to a floured baking sheet. So again, it doesn't take a whole lot. And this is going to be plenty for your family. So I take it and I just flour the cookie sheet. Now this is a non-stick pan, so it's really not going to be sticking. I'm just going to put the excess in here. Okay, and then I'm going to slide this off onto my sheet. Now I'm going to slide this into the oven at 450, and we're going to cook it. Need to check the timing on this because I don't remember off the top of my head. 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to set it for 10 minutes to start with because you don't want to overbake it or it'll become very hard. So timer, and then up 10 minutes. And start. All right, we'll come back and check it after 10 minutes has gone off. Okay, I've been watching it, and I'm actually taking it out a little bit before the 10 minutes. You need to watch this or it will burn. In fact, it got a little browner on the edges because not equally rolled out. But you can see it didn't puff up. And I'm going to show you, we're going to set this out and we're going to let it cool a little bit. Go ahead and turn our oven off. And then all you have to do is break up the pieces. Now, one of the things I like to do, because everybody, or almost everybody, loves the taste of communion bread. And we don't get to take it home, the leftovers home, and eat it. So what I like to do is set out aside some for the family to enjoy. And so I will, when I make it for church, or when I would make it for church, I always make a bigger batch than what would call for. And also another thing that I do is, what you can do is bless only the portions that you use, praying over that. So that's how you make communion bread. And I'll just show you how easily it breaks apart, just like that. Also, always leave a few pieces, maybe 5 or 6 that are bigger pieces, so that when you're ready to serve it, you can break, because Jesus says, this is my body which was broken for you. And we like to do that as a symbolism of that act. God bless you. I hope you enjoy making it. Do it with your family. But more importantly, I hope you enjoy serving each other in communion and remembering Christ's death till he comes. God bless.